While all eyes are on the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, a smaller but still major oil leak continues here in New Mexico. It's on top of the aquifer beneath the surface of Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque. And while it's not as big as the one in the Gulf, it's huge by any other measure. John Fleck is science reporter for the Albuquerque Journal, and he's been following that story.
The leak was first discovered in 1999, but it wasn't until 2007 that the Air Force realized that it had actually reached groundwater and that the problem was a lot more serious than folks had originally believed.
Is it actually mixing with water in the aquifer?
It is. It is. You have a plume of liquid fuel sitting on top of the aquifer. The groundwater here is more than 400 feet below the surface. You have a plume of liquid fuel that's floating on top of the aquifer, and then some of the fuel has actually mixed down into the aquifer and spread even farther. It's gone, they think about a mile from the original source of the leak.
This has kind of been under the radar of lots of people, perhaps because it's been going on so long with no frequent updates. Is that your impression?
Yeah, it started mildly because it originally appeared when the Air Force first discovered it back in 1999. It looked like it was a relatively small leak and was confined to the soil immediately in the area around the leak. And so it didn't look like a serious problem. It looked like a problem that could be managed by just cleaning up the soil in the immediate area. And one of the problems was that the oil followed a kind of circuitous path to get down to the groundwater. So the first wells that they drilled to look for groundwater contamination didn't find any. They thought they were clean, and it wasn't until they drilled some more wells a little bit farther away that they realized it had reached the groundwater.
How big is this spot of oil in the aquifer?
The New Mexico Environment Department just released a new estimate, which was the trigger for my story. They think it's 8 million gallons. Big numbers are hard to get your head around, but 8 million gallons is, in the neighborhood of what leaked out of the Exxon Valdez in that oil spill. So it's really a lot of fuel. If you compare it to the other groundwater contamination incidents around the city, around the state, where other things have spilled and affected groundwater and potentially threatened groundwater wells, there's nothing that comes close to this. This is by far, the biggest, most threatening groundwater contamination issue that we have in New Mexico right now. I think most of the experts that I've talked to agree on that.
Does the Air Force agree with that 8 million gallon number?
The Air Force's number is between 1 and 2, and they haven't, they haven't argued strenuously with the New Mexico Environment Department's new assessment yet. I think there's a little back and forth going on between the Air Force technical people and the Environment Department technical people about how that estimate was arrived at. But the Environment Department is coming down pretty hard on them because they think that the Air Force has really underestimated the extent of the spill and hasn't been aggressive enough at characterizing how far it's gone and in taking immediate, fast-moving steps to clean it up. And that's, I think, where the dispute is right now between the Air Force and the Environment Department.
Well, here, once again, we have an issue with a state agency trying to dictate to a federal agency what to do. They've had problems with the Los Alamos lab and really getting together on cleanup methods and process and so forth. What can happen with the Air Force? Can they make them do it?
Well, one of the things that the Environment Department has done, and this is kind of down in the bureaucratic weeds, but it's important, is they shifted responsibility for this problem from the Groundwater Quality Bureau at the Environment Department to the Hazardous Waste Bureau. And then, while that sounds sort of like just moving around things on a bureaucratic organization chart, in fact, the Hazardous Waste Bureau, under the statutes that govern its legal authority, has some more regulatory teeth to really try to force the Air Force to do something. There were questions about whether the Groundwater Quality Bureau, which operates under some different statutes, had the legal authority to make the Air Force take action, because of federal government immunity. The federal government doesn't have immunity under the statutes that govern the Hazardous Waste Bureau, and so that's, I think, the Environment Department's hope, that they have a little more regulatory and enforcement teeth, because the Environment Department frankly thinks that the Air Force isn't moving fast enough on this.
And the Air Force point of view, do they say they're moving fast enough?
They think they have things pretty well in hand. They believe that because the fuel has been moving a long time and has only gone a mile, that it will be sufficiently long before it can reach the groundwater wells, that we have time to take action to protect the city's couple of big city groundwater well fields that are in the path. The Air Force thinks there is time to to do that. The Environment Department disagrees with that, and also the Albuquerque Water Quality Advisory Board, which has been looking at this question, also is not entirely satisfied with the alacrity with which the Air Force is pursuing this.
Well, I guess the good news is Albuquerque is not totally dependent on that aquifer for its water supply.
Yeah, with the city turning to San Juan Chama to imported Colorado Basin water through the San Juan Chama diversion project, we have surface water available now. It allows us to reduce our reliance on groundwater, much as Santa Fe is doing with the Buckman diversion project. But we're not leaving groundwater behind, and in fact, these aquifer fields remain especially important to the city's long-term supply picture. The surface water project is only a supplement to continued use of groundwater. I think we're going to continue to rely on groundwater for a long time. And from the perspective of the water utility, this is especially important because these are well fields of really good, high-quality water. We know one of the problems we have in various areas in Albuquerque is high arsenic levels. They want to get off wells that have higher levels of arsenic. In some parts of the city, naturally occurring arsenic in the groundwater. These well fields, the Burton and Ridgecrest well fields, have low levels of arsenic. This is really sweet water for the water utility, and so a very important part of Albuquerque's long-term water supply future, independent of our use of surface water.
John Fleck is science reporter for the Albuquerque Journal on At Noon from KSFR News.